So my name is Jim Hall. I'm director of the Environmental Change Institute in Oxford. And I also direct a consortium of UK universities, which is called the UK Infrastructure Transitions Research Consortium, which is working together to develop methodology, tools for thinking about the future of infrastructure systems, for planning, for understanding the risks, for making the case for how we can steer national infrastructure from a more long-term perspective with more of a view to sustainability. Well, infrastructure is one of the most important sets of decisions around sustainability, because the decisions we make now lock us in to certain patterns of behaviour for a very long time in the future, and sometimes practically irreversibly. The patterns of land use which highway development leads to is very difficult to do anything different after that. And it also, infrastructure determines our resource use as well. So the amount of energy that we're using and the types of energy that we're using, the way in which we use water resources, what we do with our waste, is all basically boils down to our infrastructure systems. Well, I think you start by listening very carefully to the questions that policymakers, decision makers are asking, and interrogating those questions and looking, well, where are the evidence gaps, and how can research help to fill those evidence gaps? So you've got to start with the question. But actually, when you look at those questions, they have enormous implications in research terms. So decision makers are asking questions like, what's the relationship between infrastructure and growth? They're asking questions with respect to the environmental impact of infrastructure. They're trying to understand the social impacts of infrastructure. And all of those lead to some extremely interesting research questions which we're working on. Infrastructure is a global issue, and we have a lot to learn by sharing experiences globally. Even though it's such a big issue, it tends to have been carved up in fairly disciplinary terms academically, and so there are well-developed discipline communities, but actually initiatives, programs which are looking across the piece, which are trying to join up the dots, there aren't so many of those. So we're really looking out around the world to try and see potential partners, collaborators who are working on the same types of problems, have got the same perspective as us, so that we can learn and collaborate together. Well, when I was putting together the research proposal for the UK Infrastructure Transitions Research Consortium, as I say, we were looking worldwide and thinking, well, who are the potential partners and indeed advisors which we can collaborate with, benchmark against in this UK consortium. And I was aware of that SMART was getting going. I made contact with Gary Bowditch, and Gary has been part of our advisory board on the Infrastructure Transitions Research Consortium. And so that's been very important. He's given us fantastic advice, but also very important to understand that there is this related research activity going on, which we've learned a great deal about in the meantime. And so that's been very informative for us.